Hello, this is David Lorden. For those of you that were not able to be at the lecture this week, which was chapter 7, I'm recording the lecture right now. So I'm going to share the lecture. And this lecture this week is about enhancing business processes using enterprise information systems. Enterprise information systems are really the systems that drive the core enterprise. They align with all of the core business processes, which we'll be going through today. And it's been a pretty dramatic development within the industry over the last 15 to 20 years that most companies have spent a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort integrating these enterprise information systems. So first, we want to talk about some of the core business processes that are common to all organizations. And by these core business processes, I don't mean like sales, marketing, finance. It's more basic than that. It's almost like a view from almost like an accounting as to how the flow of the physical goods and the money is flowing through the organization. So there are 5 distinct functional areas within an organization. There may be more than this, but these are sort of a good set of 5: marketing and sales, supply chain management, manufacturing and operations, accounting and finance, and human resources. They're not pillars, though. These don't happen in parallel. It's more like the gear metaphor below. They're all intertwined with each other and are dependent on each other. So these are 3 core common business processes that every organization to some degree follows. The first one's called order to cash, and this is really the process of selling goods and services and collecting revenue from them. So you sell a good or a service to a customer, and there's a process to fulfill that order and to collect the cash back. The second one is more about how a company works with its own vendors to get the raw materials that it needs to run its organization. So they order goods so that they can make the goods and services that they ultimately sell to customers. And then the third basic process is a little bit more, there's a little bit more depth to it. And it's the process of manufacturing goods either based on a forecast or based on a unique order. So we're going to go through these in a little bit more detail now. So the first thing is called order to cash. This is a good sort of sequence of activities. So you first have to create a customer record. You would have a relational database, and you would have the customer information in there. You'd run a credit check to see whether their credit's good and it's a customer that you want to extend credit to. You would create the order. You'd allocate the stock. So you would go find if you had it in-house. You have what's called pick, pack, and ship, which happens in the 4-wall distribution center. You would then ship it to the customer, prepare an invoice, and it would become an accounts receivable, and then you would ultimately collect the payment from that customer. And the functional areas that are associated with this order to cash process is obviously sales, marketing, accounting, finance, and manufacturing and operations. So this is really more the core process of managing the relationship with the customer and ultimately getting the revenue capture from that. If you go to the procure to pay process, this more has to do with a company working with its own vendors to get the raw materials that it needs to make its products and or to generate the services that it offers. So first, you would probably have a purchasing department that would negotiate price and terms. You'd issue a purchase order. You as a company would receive the goods, you would receive the invoice, and then you would send the payment to that particular vendor. So this is you sending the cash out. The first one is you getting the cash back in. I can't tell if this is still recording or not. Nope, it's still recording. Okay, so then the third general business process is called the make to stock or the make to order process. Make to stock has to do with you have products that are ordered again and again and again. You may make toilet paper, which is a hot commodity right now. You may make facial tissues, and you need to go through the process of having enough of that on hand so that when a Walmart or a Stop and Shop needs to have those on its shelf, they would reach out to whoever the manufacturing is. And that is the whole process of supplying those products to a Walmart or a Target or a Stop and Shop. The make to order process is really more when there's a unique order. You may have something that is not a staple item, something that's more unique, and you have to give specifications to a particular vendor to make. And that's more of a one-off, more of a specialized set of processes. Okay. But these three general processes don't exist unique. They're integrated as well. And all of these processes together create the overall supply chain, whether it's from vendor into the customer or from customer out to, or from a company out to its customers. And you can see from this chart on page 9 that all of these three processes are pretty integrated and working very much in a cooperative fashion as opposed to an independent fashion. Okay, so these next series of charts take these core processes and correlate the key activities that happen in any company. There's a bunch of core processes that any company has to deal with, whether it's inbound logistics, its operations and manufacturing, outbound logistics, marketing and sales, and customer service. And then there's a series of support functions that all of you may or may not be working in when you go start your business careers, but there's administration, infrastructure, and that mostly has to do with physical plant, human resources, all of your technology infrastructure, and your procurement processes. And what I want to do is to just sort of share with you as a reference that each one of these activities, whether it's the 5 core activities or the 5 support activities, there's a little bit more detail in these charts talking about what happens. So if you were to go through this in a screen show, it would show you what all of these core activities, a little bit more detail about these core activities on chart 11. If you go to chart 5, it's a little bit more detail about what these support activities entail. These are put in here as a reference for you, and I think they're a pretty good reference. This is about 20 pages in the chapter consolidated down into 2 charts. Okay, so that now I want to talk a little bit more about what enterprise systems are and how they've evolved. So we talked about the core business processes, these sort of 3 generic processes, and then all the different functions, whether they're core or ancillary to making a business run. So these all come together in enterprise systems that are either standalone legacy systems or much more integrated. 20 to 25 years ago, each one of these systems, whether it's sales and marketing, financial accounting, human resources, they all would have been sort of standalone. They would have been built by hand. They wouldn't have necessarily been that integrated. And what happened about 15 or 20 years ago are vendors like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, even IBM, started offering much more integrated suites where it brought all of this functionality together in one ecosystem. And that's the concept around these enterprise systems. And they're connected to a common data store through a relational database. There's much less data redundancy. It's a much more there's much more integration in terms of how the enterprise works. And these enterprise systems support both internal processes, like the manufacturing, and the external processes as well, like the supply chain and customer relationship management. Now, in the past, this software would have been mostly custom built. They would have been standalone independent systems that didn't have a lot of integration. They didn't share the data the way that you should. They would have been built within the enterprise themselves. And a lot of enterprises found out that this was not an efficient way to run a cost-effective or an efficient way to run their business. So more vendors like Oracle, SAP, Microsoft, IBM started offering much more integrated software that was more packaged, that could be purchased. And as opposed to writing the code from end to end, you would integrate the code and integrate it into your enterprise. So the industry has shifted more from custom software into the integration of these package software systems. I wouldn't worry too much about page 17 here, but the real point is that there's tremendous benefit to these enterprise systems. There's improved availability of information. There's more integration and interaction throughout the enterprise. It makes the processes more efficient, faster. The lead times are less. If it's done well, should cost less money, should reduce the amount of inventory and the carrying costs that you have with that, should reduce the amount of IS costs, and should improve supplier integration as well. But there's costs associated with implementing these types of systems. A lot of times, enterprises underestimate the amount of training that has to happen, and they don't properly fund the amount of training, and thus people are not using these systems up to their maximum capacity. Business processes change, and sometimes these integrations never really keep current with how the business processes change. So there's sort of a perpetual amount of customization and integration cost. And when these implementations are done well, there's a lot of benefits. But when they are not done well, I've seen them fail in a lot of large companies, and a lot of IT people that have been trying to implement these systems end up losing jobs. So it's a definite benefit cost. When it's done well, there's a lot of benefit, but there's a lot of risk. And if it isn't done well, it can go over cost, over budget, and not live up to the promise of what an enterprise system should be. Okay, so I'm going to stop now. That was part one of the lecture. I'm going to post this to Blackboard via YouTube, and I am also going to stop now, and then I will record the second piece of the lecture, again, for those that missed the lecture last Monday at 4:30. Thank you.